You've landed at Spark Launch, the guide star for embracing what it means to be neurodiverse. Here, we navigate mental health triumphs and tribulations from all across the spectrum, charting a course through the shared experiences that unite us, and discovering how to embody the unique strengths within neurodivergent and neurotypical alike, igniting your spark and launching it into a better tomorrow. Today, we're joined by Enrique Cachafeiro, an education innovator who spent over a decade disrupting traditional classroom paradigms through gamification, virtual reality, and immersive learning environments. Enrique currently serves as the education and training coordinator at Duke Health, where he continues pioneering work in serious game design and education technology. And we are very excited to have him on the show today. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome, Enrique. You and I met at the Serious Play conference, and we just got off speaking about the most important things, about how we're going to tear down the system to build new ones that's more inclusive than what we have today.
Yes, it was nice bumping into a kindred spirit at the conference. Not everyone is quite at that level where they realize that the system is not worth this. We can't fix it. It's more about starting fresh, something different.
So where are you with that in that process of innovation?
Oh, well, I mean, I feel like a lot of days I'm a lot like you, screaming into the wind, trying to share ideas, meeting like-minded people and trying to promote change. Last semester, I finally finished my doctorate, which was a big highlight in me trying to formalize my education in transforming how schools work. Now I'm trying to apply that into seeing how I can affect change. This semester, I was fortunate enough to get invited by Duke University to teach a class in serious game design. And I feel like games are a fantastic modality for inclusion. I think it's a natural avenue for a lot of people to learn with, especially ones that are neurodivergent, neurospicy, like my kiddo. And I hope that the class promotes more of that work of using a game environment to educate, and in doing so, make that part of the life for a lot of us easier by being able to engage us in a different way than sitting down still and watching PowerPoints and being on a single topic for extended periods of times, which I think is just not comfortable for, to be honest, anyone.
You are in the teaching profession. What do you see from the other side when you see children, students?
Yeah. So I was a high school teacher for 8 years. So I got to see a lot of it from that end. And I was lateral entry. And I feel fortunate that I was lateral entry because I came to it not from a background in education. So I noticed a difference between lateral entry folks and individuals that came through the system, in that they're a lot more able to conform. They know kind of the rules of what it's supposed to be like. And I was constantly pushing against those, specifically because I saw how uncomfortable the kids were, how bored they were, how they struggled with it, especially my kids that had ADHD, that had to have a one-on-one because they had Asperger's or something else, that the system, they had to have accommodations, and they have to be accommodated because the system is not built for them. So it requires extra effort on a regular basis. And it was difficult all around. Many teachers, and this is something I tell anyone that is thinking about doing an IEP or 504, and that's what they do here in North Carolina. Other states are different, but for their kids to get evaluated for autism or anything else, I tell them that be ready to fight, because for the most part, teachers are at a level where they're just treading water. They're just dealing with red tape, dealing with a lot of micromanagement, a lot of pressure from parents, a lot of pressure from the community, and dealing with students that are mostly unhappy to be there. So a lot of classroom management. And then when they have 2, 3, 4, 5 kids that have special accommodations, a lot of times those won't happen. So there's fight from the teachers sometimes, as far as like, are they following the rules of those accommodations they're supposed to be following? Do they have the time? Can they find someone to do a read aloud? Can they find a space to do a separate setting? All those things. So there's some friction there. And then from the kids themselves, because they don't want to be separated from the others. They don't want to be pointed out as the one that's different. So all those things are just indicative, symptomatic of how uncomfortable this system is for anyone that isn't what it was built for anyone not this fictional, normal student that they aim for.
So when you make accommodations, you're making these adjustments so that the student can fit in. So you're still, there's a lot of compromise from the child and from the people in the system. So it's the adjustments, but it's still not perfect, right? So I always feel the fastest, easiest way is to create an alternate system, because the adjustments still feel like adjustments, not 100% of the solution.
Oh, not nearly. The way I see it is, if you have a shoe that doesn't fit you, accommodations are like giving you a shoehorn so you can best put your foot in a shoe that doesn't fit you. So yeah, they're just trying to make things more tolerable towards a system that still doesn't work, right? So that doesn't take away the fact that none of this is fixing things, not just for those kids, but the other kids. So it's not like the system is broken for one type of child. The system is just unsuitable for this age, period. Fixing it doesn't change the system, right? It just makes it more tolerable or makes it more palatable. You can get some of those metrics that they think are important, like grades and getting into college, and it does that well. That's what it was designed to do. Move kids along, pass them, graduate them, put them in college. And for the most part, 99, 98% of everyone that doesn't look behind the curtain, that is success, right? But then you start looking at the numbers. You start looking at the fact that once they get into college, they require all these remediation classes because they are not ready. Once they get to college, sometimes they drop out the first year, second year because they're overwhelmed. Once they get out of college, they're not ready for the workforce. And now workforce has to do certification programs to get them ready to work. When the theory was that if they did all these things, they checked all these boxes, they were ready to work. So it doesn't work. When it does what it's supposed to do, and that's a big part of my dissertation. When it does what it's supposed to do, which is you get lots of A's, you get good on the SAT, ACT, you graduate, you go to college, you've done everything that the system wants you to do. Society is happy with you. And yet what we have are kids that are not ready for this life. They're not ready to be flexible because they're going to be changing careers. They're going to not be ready to deal with an environment that has AI. They're not ready to deal with having a mountain of data and information thrown at them through these devices that they carry every day, because none of what they're doing prepares them for that. They're learning for the life of the 1950s, 1930s, 1920s, where one career carried you throughout your life. And that's a reality now gone. So that's the fundamental problem, right? I mean, I'll speak specifically about how it makes it so unbearable for our newer spicy kids. But you're right in that's just one piece of it. The primary piece of it is that a system doesn't work for us, period.
Yeah. People for whom the systems have worked have come and told me that it gave them the false confidence just because they got really good grades and they did really well in school and they got many degrees. But when they went into the real world is different. So whatever worked in the classroom did not work. And so it gave them that false confidence. And how many people will actually admit to that? Just maybe a handful.
And it's hard to argue, right? Because for the parents where the kids, that it worked for the kids, and this is especially parents in affluent systems that have robotics programs and can afford the extra tutoring or have all these opportunities, right? So it's hard to argue against them, because for them, what's the problem, right? They didn't come with the communities where the kids are 35, 40 to a classroom and the teachers are basically babysitting and some of the kids get arrested. But those parents are going to say, it worked great. He did great. But my counter argument, which again is hard to defend, is what if it was a different system? Could they have done better? What was the potential that wasn't realized? And I was lucky. Well, I'm lucky for a lot of reasons as far as my own two kiddos, in that I had one of each. I got my older kiddo who's super special, and then I got my younger one who did the system, right? He's right now at college here in North Carolina. He's getting good grades. He's doing all of that. And in many ways, I'm more sad for him in that he did what the system told him to do, which involves learning to conform, learning to behave, learning to sit down when the bell rings, learning to not question, learning to be told what to do. And that's the conditioning that happens that makes our kiddos less prepared. So it's not like this is a sum zero, like a neutral effect of schools, and there's not adding more to the preparedness. It is actively making them less prepared by conditioning to a system that makes them dependent on being told what to do, where to be, how to behave. And when given the freedom of college or beyond, that conditioning just makes them unable to deal with situations. And that's where they tread water, they struggle, they need extra support in many ways. So I'm definitely not saying that school is not helping. I'm saying school is actively detrimental. And for special kiddos, it's even worse because the system is really good at putting labels on people. So those kiddos come out knowing to their core, they don't have much potential. They're not going to be really good at things. They are on the spectrum, and therefore that means that they're limited in many ways. They're not honor students. They're low flyers. All these great little shoe boxes that we stick the special kids into and that they internalize, right? And that follows them. And that has a real impact on what they'll try to do and how they feel about themselves on the rest of their lives. And we do that on the daily basis. And it is absolutely tragic.
It feels like a lottery you aren't able to buy into when you're starting from a place like that. Because there's the level that some people are able to, not through obvious privilege, but are able to work in the system that's there and set up in a certain way. And they can lift them up to a point. But even then, they could go further if it wasn't so homogenous and so restricted in a certain way. And then everybody else, well, you're just kind of given up on if you're neurodivergent or whatever else. There's no real interest or care. I think because so much of those systems are still going off of practically treating our society more like an ant farm. So if you are not going to be of obvious use in a direct, simple, put down on a checkboard sort of way, well, screw you. More or less, that's what's going to happen. And the idea of accessible education is treated as if it's controversial most of the time, which is funny because it's arguably better for everybody, including the people who are doing good in the current system. What it would do for them is take them off the tightrope of what the system is, where if you happen to go left or go right just a little bit, you fall off and then there's nothing to catch you. Well, instead, you have a regular walkway to walk on so you can actually completely get across and not everything is so perilous.
And that we need to have the pathway, or it's less about like the kiddos and more about what we're putting in front of the kiddos, right? So like you're saying, but we're so ready to blame them, right? So ready to put labels on them and, trouble students or, low potential or not good at math or whatever, when it's always been the same thing, is that has been our inability to reach them, our inability to design a system that works for them. But that's a hard truth, right? To put that failure on society. A lot easier to put it on the kids, which is just silly, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're getting your car fixed and your mechanic blames like your car on being crappy instead of like their skill to fix it, that's just ridiculous. So, but that's the system that we have, unfortunately.
When I realized that actually I was also causing a problem to for his behavior was when I realized, oh my God, it's not. That child gets the label, right? And that child gets medicated. That child gets therapy. That child gets everything. But what about the environment? What about the parents? What about the school system? Nobody's looking at that. But instead, who gets the label and the suffering, the focus, the hyper focus is on that student instead of looking what else is causing that person to behave like that.
And to be perfectly clear, I'm not putting any of this fault or discrepancies or shortcomings on the special ed teachers that are on the ground, on teachers, period, who are trying to do the best they can with the resources they have, but they're swimming against the stream because the system is not designed for that. So they get the kiddos for X amount of time. They have mountains of paperwork. They often get more kiddos that they can really assist because sometimes the needs are so great. And what I've seen anyway, in my experience, a lot of teachers are hit hard by the dangers of being too qualified. So if a teacher does well with a couple of kids that are atypical, that are neurodivergent, the next time their class will have 5 or 6 or 7, or a lot of kids with behavior problems, and then they're inundated, right? And then what you have is either burnout or just trying to keep up with classroom math. And these are teachers that get hit, bitten, spit on the regular basis, and they get paid nothing. They get paid peanuts for their work, but they're there every day. So it's not on them, but the system makes everything so much more difficult for them until they finally leave.
Yeah. And they're working hard and it affects their mental health, right? Same with the parents. I mean, which parent doesn't love their child? It's just that the lack of awareness. That's what I saw, that gap. Like me, for instance, I didn't know actually those symptoms were caused by the environment, not with my son, because he's in, knock on wood, a very happy place now. So it doesn't have to be permanent, right? But that, yeah, so the parents, it's no fault of parents or teachers. I mean, thank God, right? We need all of them and they're working hard, but they don't have to work so hard. We had a good system.
I remember one of the kids I had in a class one year, he was the most acutely ADHD I'd ever seen. Like if he missed his meds, he was just off the walls. But for me, the Saturdays was when he was medicated because he was just a lump. He was just sitting there and he would write things and it just took the life right out of him. It just wasn't the same kid at all. And the fact that we have to do that to them to fit a broken system is absolutely insane. I wanted the kid that was wild and had questions that I never thought of and was active and was working on whatever it was. He would listen to me. He could process so much information at once. He would go into these deep rabbit holes and that would take time away from class, but especially when I changed the structure of the classroom, that's where those kids can thrive. When you have the one-to-one and all the kids can be working on what they need to, but at their own pace. And you can see them immediately change personalities and begin to realize that they're awesome. And that's special.
And that goes back to, I think, something you mentioned earlier, the idea of limited potential, which is already a broken concept to begin with, because limited potential, or are you examining why you are declaring that child has limited potential in a lot of ways? Because it can change based on circumstances, based on the kid's circumstances, based on individuals. So many people that I think we label as limited potentials because they're not fitting some sort of basic molds that we need them to for various different reasons. And those kids who do have a lot to offer in some way, because everyone has some sort of form of potential. Well, it's not fostered because just throw them off to the side until, ADHD kids, they're either going, like you said, they're either going to be lumps or they're going to be all over the place. Why is that barrier to potential at that point? Like that's something that is there, like that's a mind at work. And going off of something else you said earlier about teachers dealing with limited resources, it's not only like limited resources, but below the bare minimum of resources on top of that. And we live in an age of practically unlimited technology, but they're still getting grandfathered in ways of teaching that is not utilizing technology to the fullest extent, where they, even with limited resources, they could gain a lot. And I think that goes back to things that you do with gamified learning, and which is taking a new way of utilizing technology and applying it to old ways of teaching and creating something new from that. So could you kind of walk us through some of those ideas?
And the first thing I need to say is that technology can be a great facilitator for those changes, but it's definitely not necessary. It's all about changing or being able to step outside of that mold that you were talking about of seeing education equaling school. And that's the biggest problem, in that
Yes.
most individuals can't conceive education happening without that mold, without a classroom, a teacher, a school, subjects, semesters, all this that was fabricated in the 1800s and was taken as the standard, propagated, and now is the ipso facto way that you have to learn. And that simply isn't so. Once you step outside of that and begin to think, okay, now let's redesign it to the way that the kids work, the kids think nowadays, what we need in society, then you can begin to come up with actually innovative ideas versus ideas shrunk down to fit within a box of a school. And that's a lot of what I argue in my presentations, is trying to challenge people's notions that you have to have desks and books and a blackboard and a teacher. And technology will never be a magic bullet, right? I think it was Sweden that recently spent 65 million taking laptops back outside of school. They had spent like 100 and some odd million 4 or 5 years before to make everything one-to-one. The experiment didn't work, and now they're taking it out. And that's because it's not about the technology, but how it's applied. And if you're applying to improve the existing system, you're just accomplishing the same thing more efficiently. It's like if a school was a car, right? Like say like a Model T, that's an example that I use in my presentation, a Ford Model T car, right? Think of that and think of like a Tesla. You look at both of those, they're both cars. You can recognize both as the machine that does the same thing. They go on the road. Tesla, fantastically superior, but just goes from point A to point B on a road. It accomplishes the same thing, just faster. What our kids need is to get to like an island of learning. Okay. So now you're talking about going over water. You can maybe take a car and like puts kids on it and make it sort of work on water, but that's not its design. That's where we are with schools. We need a boat. We need education designed in such a way that fits our needs now, that incorporates technology, not trying to fit it within that, the way that's used. And most importantly, works for our kids. Something that starts student-centric, not goal-centric. The schools are made with a goal in mind. They want to graduate you with basic competency in these things and put you in college. That's its goal, not realizing the potential of the students. And the students that don't get with that program are called out. They're either get in trouble, classroom management, if they're not comforting and behaving themselves, and then they get suspended, or they get failed out, but the system doesn't have time for that. If the system was about the kids, you wouldn't be taken out of school in suspension when they misbehave. You would be making sure that you find a way to educate them, and that becomes a priority over making sure that they're sitting down and quiet. So the priority here is conform and behave, which is the priorities that were there back in the 1800s. That's the thing. When we make kids the priority, then what you get to is you don't have a time limit. They take whatever time they need to learn. That's exactly how much time they should have to for a subject. You don't have grades because grades automatically infers that you're okay with something subpar. You have a C, you can pass. That means that there's at least 20% of the information or 30% that you never learned. But they don't care about that. They just need to move along with some kind of minimum efficiency. You wouldn't have like a set amount of time in the year as well, like so many days of schooling in the semester. That magically means you know it. I've worked in a number of jobs. I've yet to work in a job that was single subject, because that's just not how life works. And most importantly, it needs to adapt to a world where information and data is all of it is available readily at any time. We don't have to have a textbook. The idea of a textbook is insane. You tell me what's in a textbook that a kid can't pick up and learn about with a prompt on Google in that moment, or a skill they can't learn like that. That's the world we live in. And that's why in a classroom, you will usually have phones that are not allowed. AI struggles to be used because AI, again, gets around that funnel of a teacher being the center of information. And a lot of times they don't allow laptops. I've worked in a couple of one-to-one schools, and some teachers were like, don't take out your laptop. It's a distraction, because it can't allow to have information being freely available, because that's not what the system is made for. Yet that's the world we live in. That's one of the most clear examples of how far we are from where we need to be. And our neurospicy students, they thrive in that environment of all this data and knowledge. They can hyperfixate for days and find out information. They're great at that. And I see that with my oldest all the time. He's got these things he's interested in, and he spends hours a day investigating them, knows more about them than anyone I know. But that doesn't help them in a school environment. But it could definitely help them in some environment. They could accomplish things, but at the same time, he's a product of the school. So now that he's finished, he's pretty much accepted the fact that he's not going to be good at things. So that's one struggle that we're having now, trying to get him to see beyond the bare minimum little shoebox that they fit him in.
I see a big difference between the neurotypical and the neurospicy. I really feel with the neurotypicals, because I see that at home, I see that huge contrast, is that they need that road to be laid out for them. It's very important that there's a system, and they need it. It's a necessity. Whereas the others, like the neurospicy, we want to be in charge, and we want to go where we want to go, and it's driven by interest and curiosity. And so I think the system really works well for certain type of people. But the grading, I completely agree. That's just so much misinformation and gives false confidence, low confidence, and you're supposed to finish and produce the answers within a certain set of time. Life doesn't work like that, right? Life definitely doesn't work like that. So all these rules don't make sense for neurodivergent children, and it slows you down. The system actually slows you down drastically.
Yeah. And I think with grading specifically, how often have we seen people's identity based around what grades they received in school? Oh, I'm a C student, I'm a B student, I'm a D student, blah, blah, blah. Well, it's not really about education at that point, or building skills or anything else related to that. It's sticking an identity on someone, and they've been told they're not good at school. They're not good at this. They're this kind of student. So this kind of student equals this kind of worker, because that's tends to be what we sort of shuffle people into, is that sort of mentality. So how does game-based learning change the conversation relationship around the idea of failure is a strong word, but school failure and grade failure and everything else to something that's a little bit more active for the student?
It's probably my most favorite thing about using serious games or gamifying environments for the students. There's a lot of more practical reasons why it helps, but I would say that my favorite one is the way that games put the students or the learner at the forefront. They're celebrated, right? They are the hero of the story. There isn't failure. There's struggles, and struggles are part of any path, and they're celebrated just as much as its successes. Like any good game, trying and trying again is part of it. And then every little step that you go forward, there's feedback. And then there's tangible, positive energy that comes with defeating a smaller boss on the way to a bigger boss, or overcoming a challenge. I remember when my youngest got Cuphead for the first time. I don't know if you know the game Cuphead, but it is brutally difficult. And he would give up on it sometimes, but he would end up coming back to it until he finally beat it. Just something about the atmosphere and the mechanics and who he was within that game. Lee Sheldon is one of the authors that I read early on. He changed his classroom by making it experience point based. So everything students did contributed. It was additive, not subtractive, right? When we grade, we subtract. We take away from 100. Every mistake is taken away from your success. You're less and less. But in an XP-based classroom, which I did one of the years, everything you do adds to it. And then you could go and do more stuff and add to it. And you can see everything was a positive path towards something. And it changes the vibe. It changes the dynamic. But yes, games are my favorite way to do, in a natural way, to instruct, because they put that learner as the hero. And they're absolute rock stars.
I think the one big thing that's missed with utilizing games for education, or really any skill building, is I think so many people have not understood the amount of activation that happens when a player is playing a game. There's so much learning involved in understanding game mechanics and in becoming second nature. It's actually maybe one of the most primal ways of learning skills, is the way you interact with a game. And because of that, there's so much missed opportunity with combining what you're able to do in a game, which is often a special interest for a lot of neurodivergent students, because a lot of times it comes down to it's something they have more control over than any other aspect of their life. Most of the time, most ADHDers will find a lot more calm playing a game than they are with any other activity, because so much of their executive function is being sort of activated at one time, but it's all on one task, which is sort of rare. It's very rare for me. I cannot concentrate sometimes when reading a book or watching a movie, which are some of my favorite activities. Playing a game, I'm just sort of there, and all my other STEMI issues sort of fall away in those moments. And on top of that, you have the idea of, I think, narrative contents being utilized in a really positive way. I think one of the best ways to teach anybody is to utilize stories and immersion. And games are better at doing that than, wheeling out a small box TV and showing a video on a random day and hoping the kids care enough to be involved. But that's the difference between intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, right? And I think that's really something that's what sounds like is at the core of gamified learning and the different things you can do with it.
It is a natural modality. You have engagement, you have motivation, you have curiosity, you have an emotional component. All those are absolutely essential for long-term changes to behavior, which indicate true learning, versus the sort of like front brain passive memorization that serves students well for a test, but doesn't translate into actual long-term storage of the information or changes in behavior, which is, again, indicative of actual learning. And something Chaya said earlier about how schools work for the neurotypical, I would say that the neurotypical folks can conform to schools. I would not agree with that it works for them. I think they can get used to it better, and they will play that game. They learn that game better. but I don't think it works for them if by working that refers to make them better humans, make them better able to deal with life, make them more prepared for everything that's to come. I think it fails at that and has for a long time. In my classes, when I gamify them or when I do serious games, it's a mixture of kids that are spicy or neurotypical playing them. They both benefit. Both of mine love to play Pokemon, the Pokemon game, and they do it from different angles. My youngest, he loves math. He likes doing the math on what moves are critical versus vulnerable, etc. And my older one, he can tell you he's got literally hundreds and hundreds of Pokemon memorized, their names, their evolutions, their colors, their alterations. He can talk about it at length. He's an encyclopedia of knowledge when it comes to it. But again, they both will play the game together and share the experience together. And it's the power of that. In the game space, all kids come together. You don't have to differentiate between their neural states. They're just kids, all think in different ways, but all can benefit from the same experience learning through this natural modality. And that's the beauty of games. And a third of my dissertation was solidly into what I would see education becoming. And it is essentially a big immersive learning environment where kids can collaborate to learn on doing tasks. They're the heroes of the story. And instead of teachers, you have facilitators that are there for them when they need it. And if not, they can be left to their own means. A lot of times school does slow them down.
I love what I learned from you, that neurotypicals have learned to conform. And that is why it looks like that the system works for them, but it really it doesn't. It slows everybody.
Yeah. And you see that, right? Right now, you're having a glut of graduates from college that are not finding jobs because they're finding that the environment changes so much that the jobs that they got started to learn have changed to something else. We need students that are prepared to think critically, to be able to take in this information and separate the chaff from the wheat, be able to use their phones, to use AI constructively, to be independent, and to accomplish tasks collaboratively with others, not these little cubby holes of individual subjects passing some test on some sub part of the material that we thought was important to prepare for a single career that they're ultimately going to have to change a dozen times. None of that is constructive for them, what gets them ready. That's not the world that we live in anymore. Yeah. And unfortunately for our kids that are neurodivergent, it's punishing, and it leaves them in a state where they don't think they are part of the society, that they have no place to fit, which is insane, because I think those types of minds that are creative and out of the box is 100% what we need. We need more of those kids that can't focus on one thing, that can take in 4 inputs at once and make sense out of all of it, and find ways to move forward in a world that's no longer as simple as it used to be. So they should be celebrated. They're what's going to save things for us.
I think these are the children who contribute to the evolution of the planet drastically. Yep. Because we can't keep doing the same thing. And, it's not going to work at all. With AI now, you have to transform rapidly. To transform rapidly, you should be open to opportunities, chase your interests, do what you love, chase your passion, because that's what's going to get you to where you're on top of a machine. You're not in the hands of AI. Actually, you're using AI to evolve faster.
We are moving into a space where anything that is a straightforward job is going to, if it's a blue collar job, it's going to be done by automated robots in factories. If it's a white collar job, if it's a desk job, it's going to be AI. Anything that's that straightforward is going to be quickly phased out. Transportation jobs, etc. That is a reality. I'm not being catastrophic here. We need the kids that are thinking about, you know what we really need? We need new hairstyles for Pokemon because they are limited. We need the kids that are thinking so far out of the box that people scratch their heads and saying, how is that useful? Because then you have other people that are like, that's fantastic. I've never seen that. That's the kind of thinking AI can't do because it's based entirely on what it's learned from the past. It's stuck in the past just like the rest of us. It's these kids that are thinking about stuff that who knows where they get the ideas from that are going to be a success. I'm basing that on patterns and how things are going right now. If it's a job that one can learn in college, it is most likely 80-90% going to be able to be done but in an automated fashion or through AI. Even now we have AI working on things like law, medicine, all these areas that if it can be learned in a school, most likely it can be done cheaply and faster by an automated system.
We need these kids with crazy ideas, weird, to come and put that idea and make it into something tangible with the intention of doing something good. If you're driven by a purpose or just interest, it should come from the heart. And the heart is always pure. It is pure. And so if you let go of money or you're not chasing these things, but you're chasing what you love, what you're interested, you will be successful. You will find a job. And if you're open to just evolution, I think we'll be fine. There's no fear. It doesn't have to be fearful.
Yeah, we just have to crack this mold that everyone's stuck in on how we're supposed to do things. And that's been my personal crusade for a long time, trying to talk about it, to go to school about it. And the more I study it, the more I see that there's no way around that.
Yeah, and as we wrap up, looking ahead, what do you feel really needs to happen for this style of learning, these systemic changes to take place? What needs to happen for all that to be normalized?
So I often get that question, and I wish I had some answer that was more palatable or more friendly. But as everything else, I don't sugarcoat. I kind of go with the trends that I see, right? And this is part of the reason why I had to get out of actually teaching in K-12, because I was seeing where things were going, and change can't come from the inside. So we already seeing it happen. It's going to collapse. The amount of money going into schools is going down, even as the number of students go up. So they are more crowded. They have less resources. Students are getting into more trouble. There's more incidents with violence at schools. More teachers are leaving. Less teachers are coming into it. They're hiring literally anyone with a heartbeat to go into the classroom. They're trying to use veterans, and they try to do instead of using full-time teachers, they'll get basically anyone off the street in there to fill positions. Now there's vouchers, at least in this state, for private schools. So students have more options, or parents have more options, but private schools and charter schools, I worked at a charter, they have more flexibility, but they're still working within the system. Montessori is a great model that actually incorporates some innovation. But at the end of the day, to move into something truly alternative, you're going to have someone along the line have the bravery and the money to invest into an immersive learning environment. I do think people are looking for alternatives, so they're willing to use this new flexibility to send students into it. It's going to have to be successful enough to absolutely bleed the current system to where it does collapse. And there's no easy, rosy way around the fact that too many parents have their minds too fixed on what education should look like. Too many superintendents, too many people that are in policy are all fixated with grades, with ACT scores, for this to go any other way than the system actually collapsing before they'll give something radically different a chance. They're going to hold on to that until they're going to basically be playing those violins until the ship is 100% submerged. None of what I'm saying is new. You can look at data from 30, 50 years ago. In the 1970s, they put millions of dollars into alternative teaching styles because they saw the writing on the wall. They saw the research. The research is already there. None of this needs to be researched. Anyone can go right now on Google Scholar and find all the evidence they need for alternative instruction. It's just our stubbornness. It is our hard-headedness by parents as well as policymakers to keep it like it is. And if I get to decide, if I have a magic wand and I get to decide how this goes, it would not be under a state or federal agency. Education cannot be true to itself while its policies are dictated by someone with an agenda. So it's got to be private. It's got to be private, nonprofit, under a group that is 100% into the education of the kids. If it's under any state or federal agency in whatever country, they're going to have their own agenda to pass. This is how in Texas they have textbooks now that change the language on how you call people previously called slaves. You have to be removed from that sort of bias and influence. So it has to be independent of those types of influences. So that's what, if I was given a few $1 billion, that's what I would do. An independent educational entity that provides education, not for any one country, just to anyone that wants to do it, with the power of AI to translate for everyone, and all those kiddos in that immersive environment teaching themselves. You design spaces where they can have fun, enjoy themselves, create, and learn along the way. That's my vision.
Could not agree more. The amount of control bad actors have over our education system. And now we can see that it getting abused and harmed in really horrible, ugly ways. And you can see that throughout history. And we have seen a couple of sort of privatizations that have popped up in an effort to change things. But yeah, it does take that sort of monumental effort that we are only sort of doing it the old way because that is power to certain people, and that's unfortunate.
Khan of Khan Academy. It's one of the people that I look up to who tried to disrupt the system by putting his learning on YouTube, freely available to bypass that knowledge being behind a gateway, basically being available to all through YouTube, which is available to everyone. So he tried to change things up and change the way the system was done. So I think he was in the right path, but I think we need to do more and think bigger.
Oh, definitely. And yeah, Khan Academy is great. That actually was a huge help for me personally and really actually helped change my life in a lot of ways. So I cannot say enough good things about them and that whole modality that we definitely need more of. Where can people learn more about this and anything else you'd like to promote?
If they want to learn about some of the work I've done, they can go to my LinkedIn. Illusorystate.com is my website. Skatemodel.com is where I have a lot of my thoughts on how to be innovative with education. Mostly, though, get online, and especially if you're an educator, do your own research. Google Scholar and look for teaching with games. Carl Kapp is a great author, has a lot of really good books that you can take in the classroom if you want to change things from that angle. And as a parent, just don't be afraid to think outside the box. And for society in general, stop equating the school system with education, that there are other ways, and we just have to get brave enough to try them.
Yes, definitely. And I'll include those and as many resources on this subject as I can put together and find in the show notes for this exact episode, which of course is on sparklaunchpodcast.com. Thank you for joining us today. I love this conversation. I love what you have to say, and I do hope to see this change eventually in the future.
Thank you guys for having me here. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Enrique. It was fun. It was a blast.